Welcome to the College Connection podcast, a podcast presented by the College of Registered Nurses of Newfoundland and Labrador. This is the College Connection podcast.
Welcome to the College Connection podcast. The College Connection podcast is made available for RNs and NPs as a resource to promote good practice and highlight the importance of regulation in healthcare. My name is Michelle Carpenter, and I'm a nursing consultant for policy and practice at the college. Today, I'm pleased to welcome Kelly Kean, who is a registered nurse and the other nursing consultant with policy and practice at the college, and as well as Brenda Carroll, who's a registered nurse and the director of professional conduct review at the college. Kelly and Brenda will provide the listening audience with information about the college's new Code of Professional Conduct, which was approved by the College Council in February 2025 and will come into effect June 1st, 2025. Thank you to both of you for being here today.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Kelly, can you tell us what the Code of Professional Conduct is?
Absolutely, Michelle. So the Code of Professional Conduct sets out the minimum expectations for registered nurses and nurse practitioners. So we know, of course, registered nurses and nurse practitioners are professionals, and that's what sets us apart from other occupations. And being a professional means that you have certain expectations or standards that you must adhere to. So the code, again, is those minimum expectations. It describes the it describes the accountabilities that registered nurses and nurse practitioners have to their client, first and foremost, their employer, their colleagues, as well as to the public. And the Code of Professional Conduct also describes conduct that would be ethical for a registered nurse as well as professional. And it also describes things around competence as well. Okay. So in a nutshell, I guess that is what the Code of Professional Conduct is.
Okay, great. Thanks. So as the nursing regulator, the college sets the standards for nursing excellence in Newfoundland. And we've heard, Newfoundland and Labrador, and we've heard time and time again that nursing is the most trusted profession. There's been lots of reports released in the most recent years that nursing is the most trusted profession. So how does the code promote public safety and client safety?
That's so true, Michelle. Nursing is a very trusted profession, and we know that the vast majority of registered nurses and nurse practitioners are practicing professionally and safely, competently. But it's very important that as a professional, all RNs and NPs have an awareness of, an understanding, and apply the Code of Professional Conduct in their practice. And when you have that license to practice, so when you have that protected title of a registered nurse and nurse practitioner, you are assuring the public, that is giving assurance to the public that they are going to receive safe, competent, and compassionate and ethical care. So there is that expectation as a professional, no matter what your role is, what your title, what your practice area is, that you are going to apply the code. So for myself, I have a license to practice as a registered nurse. I work in the domain of policy. I'm expected to adhere to the Code of Professional Conduct, the same as you and Brenda, the same as registered nurses who are working in an emergency room, or maybe it could be faculty with the university. If you have a license to practice, then you must be aware of, understand, and apply the code. And the Code of Professional Conduct, all of the statements in the Code of Professional Conduct, you'll find they're very broad, they're authoritative, and they're principle-based, and they're very dynamic and interrelated. And when you put it all together, it's what describes safe, competent, and ethical care.
Thanks, Kelly. And, as any, expectation, as if you're managing RNs and NPs, you're expected to be familiar with our standards of practice and our code of ethics. And I guess with this change, that expectation still stays, that, if you're managing RNs and NPs, you need to be familiar with this code of professional conduct. But it's really important with managers who are not registered nurses to understand what expectations apply to those that you're supervising or providing oversight of.
Absolutely, is very important for everyone who is, if you are supervising a registered nurse and a nurse practitioner, to have an understanding of what those expectations are, and making sure that you have employment settings that supports the registered nurse and nurse practitioner in being able to meet those expectations as well.
Absolutely. Brenda, would you like to add anything to that?
No, I mean, really, I think Kelly has summarized it well. I mean, it really is those minimum expectations that are are set out to delineate this is what you must adhere to in order to keep
Right.
your license to practice. And I think it's a really good point to be made that it's not just the nurse themselves that has to be aware of what their expectations is or their expectations are, but managers, particularly where you're not of the same background of profession,
Right.
it's really important that they understand what the expectations are. And if they don't know those things, they can reach out to policy
Absolutely.
and practice. Even if you're not a registrant, you may be able to reach out and look at employer policy and reach out for assistance and guidance and support in that area.
Absolutely. Because we answer questions not only from registrants or managers, we answer questions from the public, from government, from lawyers. So anyone can reach out for, a clarification on what the expectations of practice are of registered nurses and nurse practitioners.
Absolutely.
So Kelly, we have a new code of professional conduct for the college. Why did the college move to this new direction of a code of professional conduct?
That's a good question, Michelle. So you're right. The Code of Professional Conduct is a new document, so it will be our new professional standard. But standards of practice aren't new. And that's right from the RN Act and the regulations. So the college is required to have standards and have a code of ethics in the interest of public protection, of course.
Right.
And you'll notice that other professions have this requirement laid out in their legislation as well. The content of what's in the code is not dramatically different than what RNs and NPs are already used to. And as professionals, again, we do recognize that most RNs are practicing safely, competently, and ethically. But the college did require a document that laid out those minimum level of performance against which actual performance can be measured. And also we needed something that was modernized to
Right.
reflect healthcare today and in Newfoundland and Labrador.
Okay, great. So you're saying that this new code is created to address that evolving healthcare system that we're seeing our healthcare work environments.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes. And when you review the Code of Professional Conduct, you'll see terms in there that you may not have, been in our previous standards of practice. For example, there's mention of harm reduction, there's mention of trauma and violence informed approaches to care, things like that weren't highlighted in our previous standards.
Okay, great. So I know every document that's developed at the college is done using a collaborative and consultative approach. Who did you consult to draft this new code?
That's a good question, Michelle. There was a national working group actually, and there were 6 other Canadian jurisdictions involved in that work. And we hear a lot of discussions today with respect to workforce mobility, Canadian free trade, interprovincial trade. So it really was an ideal time for jurisdictions to come together and discuss practice expectations across the board. Because we know that RNs and NPs are practicing outside of Newfoundland and Labrador, whether that be, it could be Newfoundland nurses, doing travel nursing, or they could be providing care virtually. So we do know that care is happening outside of Newfoundland and Labrador, and having those same expectations right across, or very similar expectations, really supports that. Well, it supports client safety, of course, but also it also supports that workforce mobility. And once that document was in draft, then as a part of our document development, we have to have that available on our website. And we really do value the feedback from registrants with all of our document development. And I'm happy to say there was excellent feedback on the code of conduct. So a lot of positive feedback, but a lot of things, registered nurses and nurse practitioners took the time to provide feedback, and it was incorporated into the document. So that was very helpful. And there's lots of opportunities as well for registrants to provide feedback. We send out notifications through notes from the practice team, and it is available on our website as well as opportunities to provide feedback on those documents.
Yeah, great. And yes, I was going to put a plug in as well, Kelly, to, registered nurses and nurse practitioners have an opportunity to provide feedback and to have a voice when, new documents are being developed. And those opportunities are provided to RNs and NPs through notes from the practice team. And we usually keep them in for, a couple editions for sure based on the timing.
Yes.
But those consultative surveys, those consultations are available on our website for 30 days. That's one of those requirements for our, good governance from the college council's requirements. Nurses always have a opportunity to provide feedback. So, Brenda, were you consulted, I guess, as part of the college?
Absolutely, as a registrant,
yes.
I participated in the consultative process, and also as in my professional conduct review role, I would have been part of that process and putting the lens of disciplinary processes upon the document. So yes, and I just wanted to loop back. I think one of the important things that Kelly mentioned that I'd like to highlight from my perspective is it is really important that if you're practicing in a different jurisdiction, that you're aware of what that jurisdiction's equivalent, standards of practice, code of ethics, code of professional conduct. It's your responsibility to know what those are in the various jurisdictions. They may be very, very similar, but 6 is not 15.
Right.
And so just be wary. Like I just caution nurses that are traveling or doing locums in other jurisdictions, make sure you're aware of what these relevant documents are in those jurisdictions that you're practicing.
Absolutely.
Point, Brennan. I just wanted to add as well, because the Code of Professional Conduct is such a significant document, it was available for consultation for 60 days, actually. Right. And so registrants had an opportunity, but it was also sent to managers within the healthcare system, as well as professional practice consultants had opportunities, and there were focus groups with managers, professional practice, as well as faculty at Memorial University as well.
Absolutely. Having, an understanding of ELCs and standards is really important. So, having all of those input from the different groups was, very, very important. So I know that every document, as we said, goes through that consultative process, and you had your feedback and you've, made adjustments to that. So when will the Code of Professional Conduct come into effect?
So June 1st, 2025 is when it will come into effect. So that means that, as I said before, the Code of Professional Conduct is a professional standard and is applicable to all RNs and nurse practitioners, no matter where you work. So that means the standards of practice for RNs, as well as the Canadian Nurses Association Code of Ethics, both of these documents will no longer be in effect, and it will be replaced by one document, the Code of Professional Conduct.
So what you're saying is that we hear the term professional standards. So those two documents have kind of been combined.
Absolutely.
To establish professional standards that outline the minimum expectations for practice for registered nurses and nurse practitioners. But what about for nurse practitioners? Because we had, in that combined document, we had a standards of practice of RNs and NPs. Yeah. What about for NPs having like those advanced competencies?
Absolutely. So we do have, right now, is the standards of practice for RNs and NPs. Like I said, as of June 1st, those standards of practice for registered nurses will no longer be in effect. But nurse practitioners, having completed an NP education program, and they have those advanced competencies, their standards of practice, which is collaboration, consultation, and referral is one, assessment and diagnosis is another, and then finally client care management being their 3 standards, they will remain. The college is looking at the standards of practice for nurse practitioners because, like everything, everything needs to be revised after a few years. And so I know that we are looking at that document now and wondering, what should we do with that? And we're certainly going to be engaging with nurse practitioners for that work as well. So nothing really new to report on that right now, but I guess stay tuned for more information with respect to the standards of practice for nurse practitioners.
And those 3 standards will be available in a document for nurse practitioners on our website. So Kelly, since we started this process of creating that code of professional conduct, the CNA, as Canadian Nurses Association, has started focus groups and start working on a code of ethics. How will that code of ethics from the CNA be, used by registrants?
Absolutely, yeah. So, as of before June 1st, the CNA's code of ethics, the regulator was using that as a tool as well to lay out those minimum expectations. But there was pieces of the CNA code of ethics that was outside of the regulator's mandate to to enforce, I guess, for registrants. Of course, the CNA's code of ethics will still be available to registrants. I think as an association, you have to be a member there, but I believe it is just an email if you're not a member with the CNA to have access to the code of ethics. And it is such a great tool if nurses are faced with some sort of ethical decision-making, ethical dilemma, and it helps provide, that framework to work through some of those pieces. So it's a really good tool for registrants, and it's a really good tool for, faculty who are teaching, up and coming nurses about ethical decision making in healthcare and that sort of thing. But it won't be used as a regulatory tool.
Absolutely. So, Brenda, can you comment on that and, why we've gone in this direction and some of the challenges that Kelly has mentioned about the CNA Code of Ethics?
Yeah, I think she's summarized it really well. I think essentially what it is that the Registered Nurses Act, which is what gives the College of Registered Nurses its authority to act as the regulator of the profession, makes it a mandatory requirement for the college council to adopt a code of ethics. And so in the past, that had been the CNA Code of Ethics and will be our Code of Ethics until June 1st. And as part of that modernization piece, CNA has gone through a lot of transition in the last several years. And so it was felt that some modernization to that code of ethics was required. And the College of Registered Nurses in Newfoundland and Labrador chose to combine that with a review of the standards of practice and get on board with these other 5 jurisdictions that were looking at developing a code of professional conduct. So taking that code of ethics and the standards of practice and kind of making one document.
Absolutely.
And that doesn't preclude other provinces, other jurisdictions, or CNA to continue to have. There will be other codes of ethics. There will be standards of practice in other jurisdictions. There will be codes of professional conduct in other jurisdictions, and they all develop a toolkit that when we're faced with questions, we can use those as guiding documents. But at the end of the day, if your practice is happening and you are governed by the College of Registered Nurses in Newfoundland and Labrador, your conduct and your ethics and your practice will be judged against the Code of Professional Conduct on June 1st.
Absolutely. Thank you. So with anything new, I'm sure it's safe to say that there'll be some changes. Can you comment on what changes there'll be for registrants with the new code?
We understand that right now RNs and NPs are practicing safely, competently, ethically. So I really don't anticipate anyone reading the code and being surprised about what's expected of RNs and NPs. But I will say that there is a greater focus on culturally safe care, for example. So in our current standards of practice right now, cultural humility and culturally safe care is noted. I believe it's 3.9 in our current standards. But the code really digs a little bit deeper about what that looks like. So for example, the expectation that RNs and NPs use self-reflection to identify how their privileges, biases, values, and positions of power,
Right.
how those things may impact the therapeutic nurse-client relationship. That's an expectation.
Right.
Also, it's important for nurses to acquire and maintain competence in cultural safety. So, we would expect to see that nurses are engaging in learning activities
Right.
to ensure their continuing competence in that area. And that doesn't mean you have to go out and do a formal education course related to cultural safety or cultural humility. You can get your learning through
Right.
informal means like, reading a research article or, it's quite flexible,
Right.
the learning activities that you
Absolutely.
can do. But, I certainly look forward to, looking for ways to maintain my competence
Right.
and to acquire new competencies related to culturally safe care and cultural humility.
Absolutely.
I'm just trying to think other areas that we have. Um, Definitely, there's more focus. Principle 4 talks about professionalism and respect with your healthcare team.
Right.
So, the college, as Brenda can attest to, has been receiving more and more complaints with respect to, incivility, disrespect, unprofessional behaviors in the workplace.
Yes.
So therefore, having expectations that clearly articulates that professional behavior when working together with a wide array of healthcare professionals is actually very timely. So in our current standards right now, standard 3, so that's client-centered care, and basically that means everything we do is in the best interest of the client. Um, that talks a lot about how you collaborate with other members of the healthcare team. But this new code really brings to life what that looks like. So the new code addresses how professionalism and respectful interactions with the healthcare team must be maintained, but also includes interactions in social media as well, which we're seeing complaints related to that. And I know we did some podcast recordings with Brenda as well, and that talked about that social media piece and how social media is, um, the context of social media is kind of changing things right now with respect to professional. I don't know, Brenda, if you had anything to say.
Well, I think it's just an extension of what you've already said. I think as the world evolves, healthcare evolves, and our political structure and our social structure around us is evolving, and what the issues we're seeing in the workplace and responding to and addressing, or the issues that our registrants are facing in the workplace and challenges that they're navigating in their workday are different. And it's this whole process is an opportunity for us to give more specific guidance in some of these areas. So, like I think like with social media, I think originally back when, our original advice to registrants was no, don't do it.
Right.
And certainly when social media was new and fledgling and it was sort of all sort of fun and games, we were saying stay off it altogether. And now we're using social media to, for education purposes. And so now we're saying, yeah, engage with it, but here's the parameters under which you should be doing so
Right.
as a registered professional. And so I think that's the lens that you have to put on this evolution, right? Is that some things that maybe had to be fit under broader categories
Right.
of unprofessionalism now have their own sort of categories, or expectations around communication now have specific, expectations related to being culturally sensitive, trauma informed, those kind of things. So, I mean, we're just honing in and getting a little more specific with things that are more relevant in today's environments.
Absolutely.
And I think that the new code as well is very, specific in some areas too. It specifically states registered nurses and nurse practitioners are not to physically abuse or financially abuse, sexually abuse. Those are the things that you think kind of goes without saying, but unfortunately, there have been complaints related
Right.
to those things, right? So you'll see some more explicit things in this new code of professional conduct as well. And also a lot of focus on acting with integrity
Right.
as well, with, and in the client's best interest. So, being truthful in your practice, addressing conflict, whether that be with clients, families, or within the healthcare team, not acting as a substitute decision maker, right, on behalf of your clients. So those are some of the things. I wouldn't necessarily say that there are changes, but perhaps a little bit more detail that the new Code of Professional Conduct provides.
Yeah. And that's a really good point, Kelly, because a lot of times when we talk to registrants during practice inquiries, they say sometimes it's really difficult to know what some of those indicators mean.
Mm-hmm.
And, we have documents that further explain the indicators under the standards, but these indicators now that are in the Code of Professional Conduct are much more detailed. So they're giving the MPs and RNs more information and more details of how to meet those principles or those competencies and standards within those the Code of Professional Conduct. So they're principles,
Absolutely.
right? There's
Absolutely.
6 principles.
Yes. Yep. You're right. Yep.
Absolutely. So as Kelly said, season 5, we have a wide variety of topics, but the Director of Professional Conduct Review, Brenda Carroll, has a podcast on professionalism in the workplace that addresses social media. So we look forward to the listening audience being able to access that podcast. So, Kelly, do you think the new code will have an impact on the day-to-day practice of RNs and MPs in Newfoundland and Labrador?
So the code will serve as a reference for RNs and MPs. It shapes their decision-making, ensuring a client safety and guiding their ethical practice, and it fosters professionalism in all their interactions. It's a very, very important document, and I'll say that, the code, I'll say again that a code needs to be, registrants need to be aware of, they need to understand it, and need to apply it in their practice wherever that may be. I certainly don't think registered nurses and nurse practitioners need to read the code every day to ensure that they are adhering to it, but I think that the document will provide clarity with respect to professional accountability, professional boundaries, professionalism, team collaboration, and what that looks like in nursing practice. And I think having that new document really provides a good opportunity for professionals, so for registered nurses and nurse practitioners, to review their professional standards.
Absolutely. So basically, I guess to clarify, this new Code of Professional Conduct will be the substitute for our current standards of practice for RNs and MPs. MPs will have their remaining 3 standards, but also for the code. So this will articulate what are the professional standards for nurse practitioners and RNs, particularly RNs. So this is what we'll use to guide our professional practice moving forward.
Absolutely, yep. And right now, like you said, it's the standards and the CNA Code of Ethics. You'll see a lot of duplication in there.
Absolutely.
So this provides all of those minimum expectations. It's a professional standard that describes those minimum expectations, and it can all be found in one document.
Absolutely, which makes it a lot easier because I'm sure with professional conduct, and I'll ask Brenda in a second, but when you're going to look at documents on our website of what's expected of a registered nurse, there's the standards that the public or the person who's reaching out has to go to. Then they have to go to the code. But all of those expectations now are located in one document.
Absolutely, yeah.
And Brenda, how does that help you?
Oh, well, you know what? I think it's really important to note that, complaints come to us from various sources, sometimes through the employers, sometimes through the public, various sort of reasons people complain to the college. And one of the things we've really been striving to make sure we are doing in our role in the professional conduct department is adhering to those principles of natural justice, transparency, and fairness, and being able to very clearly and succinctly and specifically say to a registrant, this is the complaint that's come in the door, and here's what it relates to in your standards of practice, or the allegation is that you've not met this principle or this indicator under a principle. Giving the registrant that kind of clarity to say, this is what we're saying of you, not just, hey, somebody's complained about you and you need to figure out from this big long story what they think was wrong, we're going to, we have a process by which we specifically hone that in and say, this is the specific standard and indicator that someone's alleging you to infringe. Now you need to tell us your story. And if in fact it is deemed that, at somewhere in the process that yes, you did not meet that standard of practice, then we can clearly hand those things over to the practice team, because part of the disciplinary process is meeting with our practice consultants to have a practice review conversation to say, here's where I didn't meet a standard, or here's the indicator I didn't meet. And this is what I did wrong, and this is how I'm going to ensure that that doesn't happen again. Here's the things I've done. Here's the things I've learned. So it's so much better to be able to very clearly articulate, this is where you misstepped, as opposed to saying, I don't know, somewhere in here you were generally unprofessional.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
Yes.
So I think it's going to be, and yes, you said absolutely, putting it all in one document just makes it that much easier, because there is repetition. And previously we would say, well, it was this indicator under this principle and this standard, and then there was this code of ethics piece, and people were sometimes left sort of running in circles trying to figure out exactly where did I go wrong.
Absolutely.
So I think this is going to make it a lot easier for us to adhere to our principles of, like I say, fairness, transparency, principles of natural justice, make sure we're doing our job to the best of our ability, and giving the registrants very clear indicator of where they may or may not have misstepped and what they need to do to rectify that, because that's our goal. Our goal is to help build all of our registrants so that they are practicing safely, competently, compassionately, ethically, in accordance with the now new code of professional conduct.
Right. And easier for the public as well to understand what they can expect with their interactions with registered nurses and nurse practitioners.
Yeah, that's a great point, Kelly. So Brenda, are there any changes with respect to the RN or MP's duty to report with this new code of professional conduct?
No, the actual principles around what triggers your duty to report don't change. You always have a duty to report if you have direct, observable, or objective evidence of conduct deserving of sanction. However, this makes it a little easier for someone who's wondering if what they saw might be conduct deserving of sanction. Right? There's a very clear expectation and articulated document that says, if you don't adhere to the following indicators, then it might be conduct deserving of sanction. So just from that lens, knowing what's in the document, knowing what you have to adhere to and what others have to adhere to in case you witness conduct deserving of sanction is critical. So read it from that perspective so that you know and you're aware, and you can conduct yourself appropriately, or intervene when someone else is not. But the duty to report, the principles remain the same.
Okay, great. So are there any changes with respect to the disciplinary process at the College for RNs and MPs who do not adhere to the new code of professional conduct?
Yeah, so our process is outlined in the legislation, so it doesn't really change the way our process flows and the steps in the process per se, but it now gives us a new measuring stick, right? Because we would measure someone's conduct or practice against the old code of ethics and the old standards of practice. So as of June 1st, we will now use the code of professional conduct as our measuring stick. And again, like I say, that's just going to allow us to have a little bit more of a succinct sort of measuring stick and a clearer ability to communicate to the registrants as to where they may have misstepped.
Okay. Kelly, I'm going to turn it back to you now. Thank you, Brenda. You mentioned about there's some new concepts in the Code of Professional Conduct that are going to come in effect on June 1st. What would RNs and MPs do if they, are reviewing the code and they find concepts that they're not familiar with?
Sure, yeah. And some of them, not necessarily new concepts, but depending on when you graduated from nursing school, you may not have a wealth of knowledge in that area. I'm just going to use, for example, trauma and violence informed approaches to care. So, that is being looked at now as being, part of ELCs. But depending if you may have graduated 25, 30 years ago. So that's, just as an example,
Right.
if I was reviewing the Code of Professional Conduct and I wasn't familiar with the concept, well, then I would reflect on that and say, well, here's a gap in my knowledge, and I guess informally make that a part of my continuing competence goals. So every year, you have to do 24 hours of learning, and the College of Registered Nurses don't ask registrants to complete a learning
No.
plan or set a goal or anything like that. But informally, it is expected that you try to determine where your knowledge gaps are. So I would think, okay, well, this is an expectation that I include this type of approach to care in my practice, but I'm not really familiar with that. So then take some time and do some learning activities with respect to that. That would be one way that you could address.
Absolutely. And I guess one of the big takeaways here today is that, this is new and this is coming in effect, and it's incumbent on all registrants to review the code, become familiar with it, because as of June 1st, this is the expectations that they will be held accountable to as of June 1st in their practice settings.
Yep.
Brenda, anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I think you've summarized it very well. I think it's a very exciting time, and I think this is, change always comes with a bit of nervousness
Right.
for others, but don't panic. I think this is a change in the right direction that's going to serve our registrants, serve the public, and serve the college very well moving forward.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Okay, well, that concludes our episode about the college's new Code of Professional Conduct with guest Kelly Kean, who's the registered nurse and nursing consultant at the with policy and practice at the college, and my colleague, as well as Brenda Caro, our director of professional conduct review, and also a registered nurse. Thank you, Kelly and Brenda, and thanks to our audience today for tuning in to today's episode. Remember, all episodes of this podcast can be put forward to their continuing competency requirements. And also remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And we encourage you to like, review, and leave a comment whenever you can. Thank you. Thank you.
This has been a presentation of the College of Registered Nurses of Newfoundland and Labrador.